Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Continuing on in my personal finance mini TED Talk series, today we are going to talk about retirement accounts. Have you heard the terms 401k, IRAs, Roth IRAs, pre-tax and post-tax contributions, and thought to yourself, what the heck is all that? Well, not to worry, because I was super confused at first too. In today's video, I'm going to tell you what IRAs are, why they're important, what are the different types of IRAs, and what they can do for you. If you haven't seen the first part of this video, I will leave a link right here so you can go check out why saving and budgeting is important to begin with. Before we get started, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and hit that subscribe button if you're liking these types of videos. It just really helps me out in figuring out what types of other videos to make for you guys. Quick sidebar, because I probably look a little different. Yes, I got a haircut, and I also straightened it. Leave a comment below if you like this better. This is definitely shorter than I've ever gone, so let me know. So first, let's talk about what an IRA even is and why it's important. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account, or arrangement. An IRA is a tax-deferred investment that allows financial security when you retire. Basically, they're accounts where you store a bunch of money while you're working so that when you retire and you're not working, you can take that money out and use that to live off of. And that also leads to why IRAs are so important. When you retire, you're going to need money to live off of. How else are you going to travel the world, live off a yacht, and get all your grandkids a bunch of presents? And yes, Social Security will give you a little bit of money to live off of, but that's based on what age you retired at and what your income was right before you retired. And most people estimate that you'll need about 80% of your pre-retirement income to survive. That means if you were making $100,000 right before you retired, you're gonna need $80,000 per year to live comfortably. So with some quick math, you'll realize that if you retire at the age of 60 and you live to be about 80, you will need $1.6 million to live comfortably. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but to its core, IRAs are investment tools. So whatever you invest that money you're putting into that account towards, that will determine your rate of return, and basically how much that nest egg of money will be worth when you take it out when you retire. And to give you a more concrete example of why investment tools like IRAs are so important, I'll throw some numbers at you. Let's say you start an IRA with $1,000 in that account, and you keep investing $1,000 by the end of each year for the next 20 years. And let's say your rate of return on the investments that you make is 6% on average. After those 20 years, your total contribution amount is $21,000. But because of your rate of return on those investments, your ending balance is about $40,000. So you made about $19,000 on that investment. Let's up those numbers a little bit and see what happens to your investment. Let's say, again, you're starting off with $1,000 in that account, but this time you contribute $5,000 at the end of each of those 20 years. At the end of those 20 years, your personal contribution is $101,000, but your end balance is actually about $187,000. That means you gained about $86,000. That's the power of investments, and in general, IRAs. And imagine if you were to put more money into that account every year and save for maybe a little bit longer than 20 years. You could easily be a millionaire by the time you retire. So let's talk about the different kinds of IRAs. First, we'll talk about traditional IRAs, then we'll talk about Roth IRAs, and then we'll talk about a hybrid form of an IRA. One of the differences between all of the different types of IRAs has to do with what money you actually put in. With a traditional IRA, you will be contributing pre-tax dollars to this account. What this means is that if you have a base salary, you can contribute a portion of that salary to your traditional IRA, and then the remaining salary will be what you get taxed on a regular amount. That means that all the money you are putting into your traditional IRA is all tax-free. Now, I wish it could be tax-free forever. I wish there was a magical loophole where you could just put in a bunch of money and never have to pay taxes on it, but that's not really how it works. You will have to pay taxes on that money when you take it out, at the income tax bracket that you were at pre-retirement. A very common example of a traditional IRA is a 401k. A 401k is a type of company-sponsored plan that you can contribute to and that your employer can also contribute to. With 401ks, depending on your company, there's usually rules around how much your company will put in for every dollar that you put into your 401k. A very common example of a company contribution rule would be them putting in 50 cents for every dollar that you put into your 401k plan up to a certain limit. Other companies might guarantee contributing a percentage of however much you put in. If your company has a 401k plan and is offering some sort of employer match, absolutely hit those minimums to get all of the money that you can from them. Let's say your company vows to match 50 cents for every dollar that you put in, up to $1,000. Make sure you put in $2,000 of your own money so you can get the maximum of $1,000 at the very minimum. If you aren't meeting those minimum requirements, you are leaving money on the table, and that money could actually amount to be a lot of money in the future for you. So don't leave it hanging. Typically with these traditional IRA accounts, you can vow to put in a percentage of your overall salary towards the plan. And I'm going to throw some more numbers at you because I want you to understand exactly what this means in terms of how much money you're putting towards your IRA based on your percentage contribution, and how much take-home money you're actually going to get based on that contribution amount. Understanding what your take-home pay will be depending on the percentage will really help you make a decision on what percentage to contribute to your IRA. At the end of the day, yes, I know you want to save towards your retirement, but you also want to make sure you have enough take-home pay to satisfy all of your expenses. So let's say you make $100,000 a year and you decide to do a 10% contribution on your 401k. That means that $10,000 will go straight into your 401k and $90,000 will be the salary that you will be taxed on. This means that you will be taxed at 6.2% for your Social Security and 1.45% for your Medicare. There will be a regular income tax based on the tax bracket you're in. There will be a state tax, and depending on whether you live or work in a city that requires it, there may also be a city tax. Shout out to those Detroit city taxes. And at the end of the day, that takes you to about $60,000 for take-home income. It's really up to you to mess around with this contribution percentage number to figure out what works for you. A couple other things to note about a traditional IRA is that most of them have certain limits. For example, a 401k plan has a limit of $19,500. You also have to start taking required minimum distributions at the age of 72. So you can't just leave your money in there and hope for it to continue growing for a while. And I did say this before, but remember, you do have to pay taxes on that amount when you start taking it out. That means that if you are at a higher tax bracket by the time that you retire than the tax bracket you're in right now, you will actually be paying more taxes by the time you take it out than had you paid the taxes right now. If you're making $50,000 now, you're at a lower income bracket than if you were to retire making $100,000. So inevitably, the money that you take out at $100,000, you will be taxed on more than if you were to take it out making $50,000. So now let's talk about Roth IRAs. Roth basically just means post-tax. So unlike traditional IRAs, you will actually be contributing post-tax dollars to these retirement accounts. What that means is you have your regular salary amount, then you are taxed on that full amount, and then afterwards you can take a portion of that money and put it towards a Roth IRA. That also means that because you pay taxes on that money going into that account, you don't need to pay taxes again when you take it out. So really, the biggest difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA is when you're paying taxes on the money you put in it. With the traditional, you pay taxes on the money when you take it out, and with a Roth, you pay taxes when you put it in. So of course, there's a couple stipulations with these plans, just like there is with the traditional IRA. For this tax year, the contribution limit is $6,000. And there's also stipulations about how much you can actually contribute depending on how much money you make. When you start making a certain amount, they only allow you to contribute a percentage of that total $6,000. And then when you make an even higher amount, they actually don't let you contribute at all. One benefit of a Roth IRA is that you don't necessarily need to start taking RMDs from your Roth IRA. So technically, even after 72, you could keep putting money into that account and letting it grow and grow and grow and take it out when you want. This also means that you can keep money in your Roth IRA and eventually pass it on to your heirs. And again, another benefit of a Roth IRA is that the money that you've already put in has already been taxed. So even if you are at a higher tax bracket by the time you take that money out, you've actually kind of benefited because you paid money when your income was lower. One last plan that I'll talk about very quickly is a Roth 401k. A Roth 401k is more of a hybrid plan. This is actually pretty common depending on if your company offers a 401k plan. It's basically the counterpart to a traditional 401k. Instead of putting in pre-tax dollars into your 401k plan, you're going to be putting in post-tax dollars, hence the Roth in front of the name. With many companies, they will do an employer match on these Roth 401ks just like they would a regular 401k. So I definitely recommend recommend checking out if your company does the same. Something to remember if your company does allow that Roth 401k plan, that contribution limit of $19,500 for your 401k plan still exists for your Roth 401k plan. That means if you put a little bit to your 401k and a little bit to your Roth 401k, together that amount you contributed still needs to add up to $19,500 or less. Let me throw some numbers at you again to really show you the difference between putting money into your 401k and here your Roth 401k. So again, if we're assuming a salary of $100,000 a year and we're assuming a 10% contribution amount, you will still be putting in $10,000 to your Roth 401k because that's still 10% of your salary. You will actually get taxed for your Social Security, your Medicare, your income tax, your state tax, and potentially your city tax, all based on the $100,000 amount. And you won't have to pay taxes on that $10,000 later in life when you take it out, but your take-home salary is lower when you contribute to your Roth 401k versus your 401k. So when choosing between a 401k or a Roth IRA, it all depends on a number of factors. Does your company have a company-sponsored traditional IRA and do they contribute to it? If yes, go get that money. Do you think you're in a lower income tax bracket right now than you will be when you retire? If yes, maybe you want to think about the post-tax dollars or the Roth IRAs. Are you at your highest earning potential right now? If so, maybe you want to contribute more to your 401ks or your traditional IRAs so that you're taxed less by the time you retire, because you'll be at a lower income bracket when you retire. How much take-home money do you really need right now? Depending on that, you can figure out how much you want to contribute to these things. Something major that you have to remember about IRAs is that they are investing tools. This means that whatever you invest that money you're putting into these accounts in will determine your rate of return. So remember at the very beginning when I gave you an example of how much you could actually end up getting if you contribute a certain amount at the end of every year, depending on your rate of return? That all depends on the investments you make with the money you put in your IRAs. So most of these IRAs are opened up with brokerage firms like Vanguard, Fidelity, and those are the companies that actually do the investing for you. There's a lot of different things that you can invest your IRA money in. There's mutual funds, there's stocks, there's bonds, there's ETFs, there's life cycle funds, there's index funds. And I hope to cover all of that stuff coming soon. Please leave a comment below if you're enjoying these personal finance types of videos and let me know what else you want to see. If you have any other helpful information, please leave a comment below because I would love to have a good conversation with you guys. Don't forget to subscribe because I also do DIYs, fashion, makeup, dance, all that good stuff. I really hope you enjoyed today's content. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys next time.